We're going to hand it over to Hank Webster, who is one of the state's leading experts on the Transportation and Climate Initiative. And he's the Rhode Island director at Acadia Center. He's been super involved in lots of clean energy programs in Rhode Island. So without further ado, take it away, Hank. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. If I could just confirm that you all can see the proper screen, my presentation. All right, great. Thank you so much. It's good to be with many of you that I know, and it's good to meet those of you that I don't yet know. I hope we can get to chat some more. I am very pleased to talk to you on the heels of Act on Climate passing. It's extraordinarily important, and hope to talk to you tonight about the Transportation and Climate Initiative, which has gotten also a lot of attention and is I think a really good step forward for Rhode Island. So let me just briefly describe what Acadia Center is. We are a nonprofit research and advocacy organization that operates throughout the Northeast. I am the Rhode Island director. I was born and raised in Rhode Island, so I have a deep affinity for this state. And before I get into talking about TCI, I do just want to make sure that everyone recognizes the incredible role that CARI played in the passage of Act on Climate. As an advocate that gets paid to show up to the State House and talk about these issues, I can attest that it really made a huge difference when all of you also were able to show up and at the State House. I remember back the March 2020 hearing when Chair Bennett of the House Environment Committee said on a hot mic that the bill should have had its own separate hearing because there were so many people there to testify. That makes a difference, and I think that also made a difference in the way that he spoke about it this year, in the way that it was described on the floor, and just consistently showing up and demonstrating the support, the numbers of letters and messages. That is really crucial, and I think that's also a big part of the reason that you saw the leadership in both chambers support it. Not discounting the role of the legislators and everybody else, I just wanted to make sure that CARI understood the powerful impact that you had this session. So thank you, Justin. Thank you all of you, Jeff, Denise, everybody that worked on it. So, all right, back to emissions reduction. So this is Rhode Island's pie chart of greenhouse gas emissions. And now we have, as soon as Governor McKee signs it, we have a mandate to shrink this pie chart down. And as you can see, transportation is the largest single source of greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution in the state. So the Regional Transportation and Climate Initiative has been developed over the course of 10 years. I will try and sum it.
Curious about that. And I think just in regards to like being an educator and.
Okay, thank you. So it's been developed over the course of 10 years. Governor CARI was the first governor in Rhode Island that got us involved in the process. It involves about a dozen states up and down the Northeast, mid-Atlantic coast. It's a really exciting bipartisan way to work together to address this mobile source of emissions, right? So this is not only going to tackle greenhouse gas emissions in Rhode Island, but also across the region with our partners, Massachusetts and Connecticut, willing to take the first step in the development of the program. So in the most basic description of TCI, this is how the policy works. The states will set a cap on pollution from the transportation sector based on the CO2 content of fuels. That cap will reduce over time. So the program is set up now in an increment of about 10 years. And the regional fuel suppliers would be paying a small fee that in the aggregate would then amount to a lot of investment opportunity for the states that participate in this program. There's a lot of technical details behind how that all works, and I'm happy to answer any questions in the chat box or at the end of the presentation. But that is the basic premise, that the polluters pay, the regional fuel suppliers at the wholesale level pay a small fee, and that raises a lot of revenue for communities to invest in clean transportation strategies. So for Rhode Island, it would look like about $20 million a year to invest in clean transportation strategies. So that would be on an annual basis. Over the course of that 10-year period, it's about $200 million total. The TCI states that are taking this first step and moving into what is called the TCI program. So you might hear about the TCI and the TCIP. It's all the same general concept. TCI is the regional effort. TCIP is the actual functional program that will do the things. It's kind of like a bunch of sports teams agreeing that they will set up a league and they will start playing, but some of the states or some of the teams are ready to play a little faster or a little sooner than others. But the other teams will come in as like expansion teams in future years. And we've seen that experience with the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative program as well, which covers a lot of the same geographic area. So the TCI states that are moving forward have also, in addition to the investment commitments, they've made a number of equity commitments to make sure that this program is serving underserved and overburdened communities throughout the region. So for Rhode Island, that means that the state will establish an equity advisory board that is comprised of a majority of members from the actual overburdened and underserved communities that we're trying to reduce pollution in, because we know intuitively that there are parts of Rhode Island that are suffering from more air pollution from transportation than other parts of the state, both because of pollution that is being generated within their or originating from within their area, and also all of us in the state that either drive to their communities on a regular basis or drive through, or people from other states that drive through, tractor trailers, interstate commerce, all of that stuff. So we're trying to really make sure that we're achieving emissions reductions in those areas. The state will look to identify what those areas are. Again, we're a small state, so we kind of know who's suffering the most from pollution, and we have a start on some of these conversations. I think that the health equity zones are probably a good overlay for places that we want to make sure we're achieving emissions reductions. And this equity advisory board, comprised of members of the community, would advise the state on an annual investment plan that would achieve emissions reductions and enhance access to transportation services. That's another key part of this effort. Is we think that through the investments from TCI that we should be focusing on improving mobility, improving access to mobility, doing things that will help people reduce their the feeling of needing to rely on a vehicle to get around our pretty small state. Still having access to a vehicle if they want it to go somewhere that's not serviced by other programs, but taking away that burden, because vehicle ownership is extremely expensive, especially if it's something that you don't want to do but feel that you need to just to be able to get to your job, get to school, get to healthcare. So we want to try and invest in strategies that help people get around without that ownership burden. Another equity commitment coming out of the TCI program is that Rhode Island will invest a minimum, and I want to stress that it is a minimum of 35% of TCI proceeds to reduce transportation pollution in overburdened and underserved communities. So the state and the Equity Advisory Board will monitor the progress in overburdened and underserved communities. And if emissions reductions, if pollution reductions are not being met, then there'll be the flexibility to adjust investment strategies to meet those goals. But it is a minimum. The investment strategy will be developed on an annual basis or possibly even a semi-annual basis. And there's opportunity within that process to invest more in strategies that reduce pollution in these communities. Other states are looking at, Massachusetts is looking at investing up to 75% of their TCI proceeds in this strategy. Connecticut has a bill right now to invest in 50%. Acadia Center supports going higher than the 35%, but this is the number that the regional states agreed to at the outset. as a minimum. And advocates have sent letters to Rhode Island's elected leaders saying, you know, we want this as a minimum. So that's kind of the starting point for the discussion. I've talked a little bit about investments into different strategies. So that's one way of thinking of benefits from the TCI program. The bigger set of benefits is actually the health outcomes. So because transportation pollution and all fossil fuel pollution results in higher incidences of asthma, respiratory illness, cardiovascular disease, and even premature death, we know that there is a huge benefit to reducing that amount of pollution. There's particulate matter, there's NOx, there's carbon dioxide, obviously, and other toxics. So there's been a consortium of health schools, institutions that have looked into what the monetary equivalent of these benefits would be through things like reduced visits to the ER, lost time in wages because either people themselves have asthma related illnesses or their children do, sick days, ER visits. All of these things have a huge financial toll in addition to affecting life expectancy. And there is a way to financially calculate that number. Actuaries do it all the time. I don't necessarily like thinking of it in that way, but it's important to know that there is an economic value to it, right? And so through the TCI program, Rhode Island could achieve up to $140 million per year by the year 2032, so the outer years of the program, in health benefits. And over half of that would be just from the reduction in air pollution. So I think that's a huge number. It steadily climbs as we get further and further into the program and we make more of these changes that we want to see. But in that outer year, we could see up to $140 million per year in health benefits from that $20 million per year in investments in clean transportation strategy. So that's a 7-to-1 multiplier. We see more benefits. We see over half of it from just improved air quality. More of there's additional benefits if we pursue active mobility strategies, and people are, walking to work or school more, if they're riding bikes more because we've improved that infrastructure, if they're not sitting in traffic as much because sitting is, the new smoking, right? We know that we have to get up and move around to have healthy bodies. So some of that is a little bit of behavior change, but the bigger portion of it is just improved air quality, and that is enormous. So I just talked a little bit about transportation pollution. Here's a map of what it looks like in our state. No surprise that Providence County, this is on the county level. There's other maps that you could look at that's on a more granular level. But this is just in the broad county level. And you see, obviously, that Providence County has the most pollution overall. In fact, Providence County has more pollution from transportation. This is just from transportation emissions. They have more pollution than all the other counties combined. So part of that is traffic around the port. A lot of it is traffic jams and congestion and travel through main corridors. So it's really important that we address that. This is taken from the DEM website. They actually have a really good, it's a Tableau-based system. You can plug in all different types of inputs if you want and see, what the CO2 output is from vehicles and different vehicle types. You can see what the particulate matter or PM 2.5, that's the really bad stuff that gets in your lungs, deep in your lungs. You can see what that is. But overall, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but these on the Providence County side, the two largest contributors to transportation emissions, basically because of the number of the vehicles, is passenger trucks and passenger cars. That's all types of emissions. When you only look at something like PM 2.5, you see that big tractor trailers and the diesel fuel that they burn has more of that. So there's different ways to cut it, but I just wanted to show you the geographic breakdown and all the different types of vehicles. So, oh, I forgot I put these arrows in. So the arrows just accentuate the point that I just tried to raise. And here's also some current mobility trends. So I discussed a little bit that another output of this program is that we can improve the way that people get around. So this is Rhode Island against the United States average. No surprise, Rhode Islanders drive alone in vehicles more than the average, almost 5% more. We carpool less, we take less public transportation, we bike less, we walk a little bit more, so that's good. We want to keep that and build on that. Taxi, motorcycle, and work at home less than the national average. So a lot of this is behavioral. I don't have any pie in the sky conceptions that we're going to dramatically shift a lot of this in the next 10 years. But I think a big goal of the TCI program is to offer optionality to people so that they feel more comfortable taking public transportation more often, that they have more routes or more service times to be able to do that. They don't have to worry about being stranded at work if they miss their last bus because there's more buses later in the night or earlier in the day, whatever the travel pattern is. And also that they could bike and they could walk more to work. If we improve complete streets and make pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure safer, better connected with each other, and we make investments in things like e-bikes or reduce the sales tax on bicycles, we could see some shifts there. But I don't want to count too much on that. A large part of emissions reduction is going to come from lower VMT and also from more fuel efficient vehicles, ideally electric vehicles and electric buses as well. I think I can skip this. This is just a quick little infographic about the different types of benefits and mobility investments that we could see. It's going to create jobs. It's going to enable drivers to prepare for this transition to electric vehicles and a lot of the other things that I just talked about. These are just some more local pictures of what these investments would look like. So if you're not into illustrations, this is a good set of photography. Very excited about electric school buses being a real possibility because there's benefits to the electric grid as well. When those buses aren't used in the summer, they could be used as big batteries that are connected to the grid. And that could help us shave the peak demand of the electric grid on those hot summer days when everybody's using air conditioning. And then also, obviously, there's a huge health benefit for the students, drivers, bus monitors, because there's no diesel fuel or other fumes entering into the cabin, all those starts and stops. So really excited about that opportunity. As I mentioned before, electric vehicle electrification is going to be a big part of this. Even if we got very high levels of penetration in transit, which we completely support, I prefer taking the bus to work when we're in the office. I get another half hour each way to read or close my eyes or just look out the window. It's I think a huge stress relief. And also it's good for the environment, climate, my wallet, because I don't have to pay for parking or all the fuel that I would have used to get into the city. So it's another good investment for us. There's been a lot of talk, especially with the federal infrastructure proposal to expand EV charging. That's something that the state is already working on through the utility programs and other resources. But we still need a lot more of it. We need to be able to build this regional and national charging network to build consumer confidence and really displace a lot of the internal combustion engines. I think announcements from the manufacturers themselves, that the auto manufacturers, that is, that they're going to stop making gas vehicles is going to spur a lot of this. And I look at, Act on Climate and TCI working together as a key way to basically prepare Rhode Island for the future that is coming our way. We need to be prepared. I grew up here watching us lag behind our neighboring states. We just caught up to Massachusetts on Act on Climate, but we don't want to fall behind on this transition because there's going to be jobs and there's going to be businesses that invest in this, and we want to make sure that Rhode Island is prepared for that. I already spoke a bit about transit. We think it's really important that they keep pursuing electric vehicle fleet, their buses. and also that in the near term, when they're still building up their fleet, that they are prioritizing those buses on routes in environmental justice communities, places where there is a lot of air pollution already, air pollution, noise pollution, lots of benefits to vehicle electrification. Rail, same explanation. Rhode Island has a rail spine. It is underutilized for Rhode Islanders getting around, and also for Rhode Island's connections to the larger Boston job market. I believe in building our own job market here internally, but I can't dismiss that Boston is also a huge job market, and the more easily connected we are, shorter travel times, more reliable service, that would be a huge benefit. But I also, as this graphic indicates, I see a lot of opportunity to connect more of our communities using rail, better leverage the RIPTA system with the rail system so that we have sort of like feeder hubs. These are all investments that TCI could help support. It's not, TCI is not a solution in and of itself, but it could be a useful funding mechanism that drives down emissions. Ports and regulated ferry services. So TCI is mostly aimed, at least the fuels that are being regulated, is mostly aimed at on-road fuels, but the proceeds could be used to also help reduce pollution at the ports that is not related to transportation specifically. So when ships come into port, to power the systems on the ships, they often idle their engines. And that's a huge waste of fuel. It's a huge contribution to air pollution in the community. So if we can put more effort into electrifying the docks, electrifying the local cranes, the drayage trucks that help move cargo in and about the port and locally, that could be a huge emissions reduction opportunity for the state. Better connected communities. This is just a map of all the bike paths and connections that are proposed and that exist. And this is great, but there's obviously some places to fill in the gaps. And also we should be thinking about ways to get around in our own communities a little bit easier. I love the idea of getting like a e-bike with like a cargo rack that could do my grocery shopping, because I'm about 12 miles away from my grocery store. I'm out here in the woods of West Greenwich. So something like that is really appealing to me. And if we had some safe infrastructure, it'd be all the more alluring. So. And this is just a quick summary of some of the groups that are working on TCI. So we've had recurring calls over the last several years. Again, this program has been developed over 10 years. So there's these groups, there's many more groups, there's business interests that are involved that are supportive of TCI. And so we're continually growing. And I'll be happy to answer questions tonight, but if you also want to talk some more, if you want to join the next call of TCI advocates, it is this Friday at 2 p.m. You can just email me at that address below, and I can send you the Zoom link. And here's some additional resources. So we have our own little local Rhode Island specific website for TCI. And also that website below, that is the regional TCI website that is run out of the Georgetown Climate Center in DC. Or you can just call me or text me at any time with any specific questions. There's a lot of information. It's hard to share in such a quick time frame, but I'm always at your service to help answer any questions. And here's my full complement of contact info. So with that, I'm done with the presentation. I am happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Great, thanks, Hank. I've got questions. People can just unmute and ask or type them in. I see Peter typed in a succinct question: legislation. So yeah, when is the bill coming? And also maybe can you talk about the politics of it?
Yeah. So great question, Peter. There is a draft bill. And it's circulating with some environmental leaders in the legislature who are adding and tweaking things, which is great. We love to see that participation. As many of you know, we've in the advocacy community all been 100% in on Act on Climate. It was really critical that we get that across the finish line. And so while we've been preparing for TCI eventually, we haven't, thrown down the date that it will be introduced or anything like that. But now with Act on Climate almost complete, we are starting to ramp up those discussions. I will say that there's a healthy amount of support for it amongst the business community. Maybe not some of the voices that we saw in Act on Climate, but other big business voices that we will be hearing from. So I'm looking forward to that. As far as the broader